Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Larry.
Hey, I'm Austin.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. Today we are going to be going over a play that Austin suggested that we go over this season. And that play is Fences by August Wilson. It was written and performed in the 1980s, and the lead role of Troy Maxson was played by James Earl Jones, who we know as the voice of Darth Vader, and he's had plenty of other
Amongst other ones.
great roles. I know I first came across him during Verizon commercials.
His greatest work, honestly.
There was one where he was actually breakdancing, but probably the double that was doing something.
Fair enough.
All
Right
right.
in the field of dreams.
A real Renaissance man.
Alrighty, Austin, you have a discussion starter for this?
Yes, so I think that there's a lot of plot points in this play that we could discuss, but instead I want to be, it's perhaps not the deepest question, I'm sure it's a question that a lot of people who read this think, but I want to ask about the symbolism of the fences in the play. So throughout the play, Troy is building a fence for their house, for his family's house, and the name of the play, of course, also is Fences. And the fence itself, I don't think takes a major plot point anywhere, but the fact that it's in almost every scene and that it's the name of the play, I think, shows that there is a lot of symbolism to be found in it. So I kind of wanted to discuss that.
It's very interesting because I think fences, not only do they keep people contained, but they also prevent things from the outside from coming in. And in a way, Troy is very much like that. He has that mentality where he wants to prevent his kids, specifically Tori, because I think it's a little too late with Lions, from going about their major dreams and desires. And he also, at the same time, wants to prevent, I think he has issues with major change. With he wants better opportunities, but at the same time,
It's almost like he's self-sabotaging.
Well,
pretty much.
Yeah, I think to speak about the symbolism of fences, there are many fences in this story. There's the physical fence that he is building, which means one thing to Troy, which is to keep out the world and its racism and its, hard injustices. And to Rose, it is a physical fence to keep all of her, to keep Troy from wandering, to keep Corey protected and allow him to grow that dream, to keep, Gabe and Lions and all of her family within a close, within arm's reach, for lack of a better term. But also you have Troy, who is a storyteller, who is a fabler, who is a huge control freak, who does not like major change, but spins all these fables and tells all these stories, and especially at the very beginning of the play, exactly. You have Blue, you have Death, you have all these different characters that he's constantly talking about, and every single time he opens his mouth, and I think we all know that person of, when I did this as a child, and they give this, bombastic, almost hyperbolic story, and everybody's like, yeah, no, that's not how it happened. You told me that story 3 days ago differently. And it's his way of being able to create that fence against himself emotionally, of not allowing the world to get in, to get under his skin. And so you have those fences, which are emotionally created, which are physically created in an actual sense of them building the fence. And you never really see that go to completion, which is sad because technically he already finished the fence years ago, because he created all of these thoughts of the outside world, of them being, always down on him. And it's true, there's a lot of
when you look at his background, you can really, the fact that his father wouldn't, all they got were scraps, he prioritized.
What I think is interesting, I don't know if your version had it, but the version that I had a foreword written by Samuel G. Friedman, and he actually talks to August Wilson about his childhood. This is almost, it's a fictionalization of his childhood. So that relationship between Corey and Troy, it's a big mirror between August and his stepfather. And something else that I have so many flags. Please bear with me one moment. Saying that, you know, you see, when a man looks in the mirror, you see God, and that's, I thought it was a very interesting way of saying it. So this play plays as a mirror to his father's relationship, and his biological father, his real name is like Frederick August, I'm so sorry, Kittle. Frederick August Kittle. Kittle was his biological father's last name. He was a white man, and he, to kind of almost put that racial profiling on its ear, his dad was a flat leader, was a drunk, did not support the family, whereas his mother Daisy would be able to stretch $1 to be able to cover all those children. Which you see, Rose is very much so that powerhouse, that backbone, the protector, you know, of the family. So there's a lot of his family in that. So it's kind of almost his recreation of trying to build that fence around a youth that was unjustly thrust into the world that way. So that's just my thought process on that. Yeah, I love fences. It's the third time reading it, and it was the first time where I actually just got to sit down and read it without having, you know, educational analyzation in it, and just seeing all of that in there, the many different layers, and the human in it that Troy is, that could be kind of overlooked as this, like I said, a bombastic, angry man who's just angry at the world.
There's definitely moments where you can feel for him, and where his arguments, there are some of his arguments that are very much a harsh situation, but there's also those arguments that make sense. His oldest son, Lyons, who he had with his first wife, Lyons is pretty much that that guy that is always asking for money. And,
like you said, okay, everybody's always coming to me with their palm out.
And Gracie, he doesn't want to do much with his. He plays music at the club, but that's about it with him. Corey, at least, is trying to. Corey's in high school, so he's trying to establish himself and make forward progress, because him as a, if he can keep up with that football gig, it's 1957. The NFL was. This was around the time that I think Jim Brown only came around a few years later, but I think that he could have definitely made something for himself.
Well, he could have, sure, but I mean, the odds of that in any situation are so far away from reality. Like, you know, what are the odds that you're such a good football player that you're going to make it into the NFL?
The fact that he was relinquished, that chance was taken away from him, I think, is a big plot point there, too. Like, he could have, but you never know, because Troy kind of took that away by trying to protect him.
When it's taken away, the chances are 0.
Yeah, exactly.
The risk, if you take the risk, the chances are slim, but it's much more than not going for a ball.
Yeah.
But granted, Troy has that old school mentality where you have to actually engage in physical labor work in order to guarantee yourself something.
Well, he wants his kid to understand, you know, what life can be if he doesn't, you know, properly kind of go about getting his skill. Like, that's what he wants from him. He wants him to learn something that nobody can take away from him. That's not going to happen with an NFL contract. That's not going to happen with any other way. I think what he wants for his kid is to appreciate, you know, what life is like when you don't have a skill, right? And you know, the football thing, right, or sports in general, right? It's a fleeting thing. He knows that because he lived it. When you have that ability for a while, and then, you know, it's gone. And it's a matter of what you're able to make at it for that brief moment. Whereas if you learn like an actual skill that's marketable, you know, you're set for a life in a way. So I think that's what he wants for him to be able to learn. But you know, his methods and everything, you know, whether or not he's right in doing that is not necessarily the point. But at least he's got the right idea, you know, or the right intention.
I see it as like, he's built up all these fences and walls around himself that he's also, you know, been placed in. You look at his his history, you know, literally in prison. That's like a literal fence, a
Yeah,
literal
there's
wall.
another fence right there.
But because of that, I also feel like he sometimes feels the need to build fences around other people in his life because he does care about them. And so I think, you know, related to that, I think his own experience in baseball and how that didn't work out, I think it's partially that he wants his son to have a skill because he understands that, you know, the likelihood of that happening is very, very small. But I think it's also partially that he himself looking back at his life and saying, well, it didn't work out for me, and I know how much that hurt me, and I don't want my son to have to go through that too. I think it was like a little bit of both. I think it was partially that he's like, yeah, in reality, the likelihood of that happening is very small. But I think deep down, he's also trying to build that fence up for his son to say, you know, I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to go out for this, spend your whole life trying to do this, and then have it not happen. Because it's not just that then your life is, you know, not going to work out well, and you need to have skill.
It wasn't coming from a malicious standpoint when he did that. It was him trying to do what he thought was best for his son, even though his son may have actually had and that's one of the beautiful moments of being able to have that off-screen, backstage, you know, off-stage communication. You don't really know if he was actually that good or not. There may not have ever been a recruiter, so maybe what Troy was doing was, you know, the better thing. Conversely, maybe there was an actual dude. Maybe this guy was actually, maybe Corey was that phenomenal of a player, but his dad was so blinded by staring so far backward and having, you know, one eye always over his shoulder, you know, waiting for death, waiting for, you know, the white man to come in and punish him for one thing or another. He could not look forward. He could not look at the future. And just you talking about trying to, you know, form Corey into Troy. There's a line from Rose where she says, you know, that's all you got to measure yourself against the world out there. Your daddy wanted you to be everything he wasn't, and at the same time he tried to make you everything that he was. So again, with the creation thought of, you know, building a fence, building him up in his image and building him up in his shadow, kind of almost simultaneously, because he was a man that was so focused, you know, focused on himself, focused on getting by. Which he actually says a lot in the book is me, up until the last point when, you know, plot twist, the baby's born and then becomes we. So, and then Rose becomes this absolutely phenomenal character where, you know, she says, I tied myself to you, I invested my years and life in you, and, you know, that fence of trying to keep you from wandering, and now, like, look what's happened. So, but it's a phenomenal thing.
A little bit ago, Austin was talking about his when he was playing baseball, and I think that baseball plays a heavy theme, not just him recalling baseball and talking about baseball in general, but his escape is going to Taylor's, which is their pub in the bar, to watch baseball. And then the whole his affair with Alberta was probably, there was a sense of the baseball theory that people, when it comes to contact with one another, eventually they hit a home run per se. And then when Corey's starting to speak up against him, Troy brings him down constantly and tells him that's strike one, you got 3 more strikes and you'll be done. That was when Corey was trying to hold him back, and Troy really struck at him. There was the heavy scene when they were outside, and he took him on the back. No, it was,
Well, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, was that, you know, he showed disrespect to him, and whether it was justified or no, like, that was that snapping moment, so.
But yeah, the two of them really, because Corey went to the military, and that was, then they never had contact again. Which it's interesting, Troy's the only one that dies in the play.
Yeah.
One of the things I like, so I like a lot of like American family dramas, but most of the ones that I have read have tended to be like matriarchal in structure. So like I love The Last Menagerie, and then I love some other more modern and weird ones like August Osage County. Like
Osage County is a huge,
very matriarchal.
Very good example.
There's it was like a play that a guy telemarketed called Here, H-I-R, totally go read that because I thought it was amazing. But that was another like very modern and strange but matriarchal tale. So what I really like about this is it centers on the father. Most of the American dramas that I've read center on the mother and her relationship with the family. So I really like that this one's about the father and his relationship with the family.
Yeah. And what a character he is.
Yeah.
He's like they say, he fills up the whole room, right?
He's big. Everything about him is big. His stance, his his voice, his stories, the way that he treats himself. His view of himself,
his mythologicalized view of himself.
Mythological is perfect. That's perfect way of describing how he thinks about himself. Wrestling with the devil and wrestling with death and all these different things. And
I think he also represents old school thoughts.
Oh, absolutely.
The past. I think that his death, him being the only one to go, represents the things moving on, because his brother Gabriel, he represents the endless settlement on relying on higher beings, in this case Christianity and faith. Granted, Gabe went through the injuries he acquired in the war, damaged him immensely.
Something else that I thought was very interesting, that final scene where it's a static scene throughout the entire thing. It's always, in the front yard, on the front porch, with, the fence in various different states of being built. At the very end, you have the daughter, the illegitimate child, Raina, and Rainel, sorry, thank you, and the garden. So it's that passage of time is shown in a garden where things, you never have anything in that yard besides anger and arguments and a half-built fence. So you have that evolution as well, like you said, it's the passage of time, it's the next generation. So.
That's interesting too, because I think maybe with the fences, to get back to the original question, what he's trying to do there is build up, his own kind of, like the family. He's trying to kind of establish like a family unit, right? I think that's what the fence represents. Because mythologically, right, the idea of the walled garden is an interesting one, right? Like that's what society, that's what culture is. It's a walled garden where you have a little bit of life in it, but it's also a man-made thing. But the garden aspect of it, shows that the vitality and the growth in the biology. So from a symbological standpoint, that might be kind of the point, right? Because we see like what Troy to me is doing is he's trying to pass on the best part of him, right? That's what she said.
Yeah.
So as Rose explains to Tori about, he's trying to give him the best part of himself. And I think you see that too, that's what he took from his father, right? Because he talks about how Troy hated his father. But the one thing that he can say about him is that he didn't desert his kids. So, and Troy took that part of his dad with him, and I guess tried as best he could to not become like his father was. It definitely was a better version, I think. Based on the way that he described his father was kind of a monster.
Yeah, better because he at least fed his kids. He prioritized that they eat first.
Yeah, I don't have to like you, but I supply for you. That's that huge, outburst that like you, I don't have to like you. I give you clothes, I give you a roof over your head. I make sure that you have all these things and you don't go without one. I don't have to like you. And I think that's something that is very important there is he demands respect. And his character does. His character fights for what he wants. And the way that...
There's a great sense of responsibility.
Absolutely. And August Wilson says, this play is kind of a testament to that generation, and especially Troy's character that had to go without, had to fight for what they wanted, and in a legitimate, actual way of fighting for the land that they had underneath a bridge with matchstick and tar paper houses. The scraps were what they got. So he kind of represents that generation that watched that evolution, and Corey now represents the possibilities of a future that is limitless. And that's why I think, unfortunately, Troy has to die in the end of it, because he's, as we said, he's so big and has created so much, has taken up so much space by the creation of himself. there's no room for anybody else. So by the time it comes around, he passes, he leaves behind this legacy. As you have the Corey and Renell singing at the end. He's still there, and the better parts, like you said, are left behind. But maybe they're not pretty. They're the better parts, but they're not the pretty parts, and that's fantastic the way that it's portrayed. So.
Yeah, I mean, like even you can see it through the progression of the two sons. Is when Troy hasn't figured things out. Not that he ever figured things out perfectly, but when he was a younger man, obviously he knew a lot less, and he had his first son, whose future, he grew up without a dad pretty much because he was in prison all the time. And you see the effect, it kind of led him to not be, as good of a person as maybe would have been otherwise.
But
then you see, oh yeah, I mean he's a good person, but like I guess successful or whatever you want to say. But then seeing him, right? He's home from jail to bury his father, and the other guy, has got his decorated corporal of the Marines, who had the better side of Troy, who was able to benefit from Troy's presence, even if he's not even aware of what that benefit is.
But the other thing that I really like throughout the entire play is you first get introduced to Lions, and he's like, "Can I get $10? I'll pay you back, but can I get $10?" But everybody knows that person's like, "Yeah, I'll pay you back," and they never pay you back. Later on in the play, he not only pays him back, but at the very end, just before Troy dies, he gives another 20. So he does find a way to give himself a stable foothold. It's just not on the timeline that Troy wanted. He was successful in his own way. So success takes many guises, and comes with disaster and failure. And yeah, you're doomed to repeat yourself and do that kind of stuff. But all of these characters become independent and successful in their own special way. Lions, gets to go after his dream of trying to still be a musician. He goes about it the wrong way, but he learns. Whereas poor Corey, he does what seems essentially like the right thing, becomes a Marine, and is very successful, but at the cost of losing that dream. So you see the duality of Troy like kind of represented right there. One got the dream job, but went to jail and had to pay for it because he was going about it the wrong way. The other person got that white picket fence American dream, which wasn't necessarily his own. So it's kind of a bittersweet end to the play. Yes, there is death. Yes, there is loss, but there's still a gaining and a brighter future in the end.
Yeah, because Corey is kind of like set, right? He's as long as he doesn't die in war. You know what I mean? He's going to have that military, the 20-year career, and then you retire, and you get a good pension, and you're set. He's an officer, so that's good. It's progress, right? He could get a house with a fence already built around it.
Anybody have any final thoughts?
I don't know. I just love it. The movie's good. The movie's really good. Yeah, Denzel Washington. Yeah, it's really good. Worth looking at.
Yeah, so if you don't read it, like I said, I definitely recommend checking out the Viola Davis Denzel Washington movie. There's also a few other film versions, including there have been a few filmed stagings of the play.
It's a marvelous play.
I think that after reading this, I'm convinced to actually watch a play version of this.
Yeah, it's the type of thing that, because it's colloquially written, I feel like it needs to be spoken out loud for you to be able to understand it, because it's all plays should just be listened to at the very least, because they can take on a whole.
I feel like August Wilson's also really good at putting a lot of stage directions in his plays.
Oh my God, the stage directions are written almost as if it's a story in of itself. I think that's just a side note there, just taking that and just beautifully written.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so it's great to read, but also sometimes it's a little like, there's a lot of stage directions. So sometimes
paragraphs for somebody to walk from like right here to right there, because there's so much meaning in it, and it's really encapsulated in the stage notes, but it's a poignant part.
Yeah, so sometimes watching it just becomes easier because of that. And Wilson's like, all his plays are like that. He has like stage directions out the wazoo.
Yeah, well,
which is good.
Yeah, I can say that it's
with
a
the
good
exception
thing.
with the exception of the Crucible, I think pretty much every play is meant to be seen, right? Like, because I mean, the Crucible is the only reason I mention that is because it's got like these long paragraphs that don't have any They're not stage direction. They're just like, here's some history.
An idea
that's not spoken by anybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
But otherwise, right? I mean, the play is meant to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you gain a lot from watching as opposed to just reading.
Yeah.
So both, I would definitely suggest both would be a very, very good idea. Because again, still reading this, there's still a lot to be gleaned from being able to hear the voices in your own head and put your own take on it, and then watching it with a more, I guess, authentic feel to it as well. So beautiful piece.
How would we rate this? 0 to 5, half stars permitted. Sorry.
5.
I don't give perfect, so I would, but 4.5.
I would give it a 5 because I feel like it does a beautiful job in painting the American family, because the American family is, you know, it runs a vast spectrum. So. And
I think that this play it talks about not only does it cover the struggles that a black family in America at this time has, but it also explores the struggles that any family can have. I think anybody can relate to this. I give it 4 because I think that the strongest element is within the character. I don't think the setting can be just about anywhere, and I think the plot flows through the characters themselves. And I think the only thing I wish that there was a bit more of was
Troy.
No.
There was a lot of Troy.
The fences themselves, I think they talk about the construction of the fences, but I don't think there's. I think there could have been a little bit more of an emphasis, especially in the last part. Even if it's just the status of the fences at the end of it.
I just wanted to ask one more question.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Like after Corey leaves, right? There's a gap of probably about 5 years.
Yeah, I think like it's 5 years.
1965 is when the play ends.
Yeah.
So do you think Troy and Rose were able to find any kind of peace in that time?
I don't, because this is what I think about that fence that she had built around Troy for so long. The baby was the kick down of the fence. You know, he lost any sort of anchoring, or you know, she put so much into him, and he wandered off and wasn't, you know, was unfaithful. I can't speak. I'm so sorry. Was unfaithful to her, and I feel like that was that. Okay, well, I tried to build a fence around myself, and look what it got me. You know, I lost everything. I didn't have time for myself. I let him take up all that space. I let him take up all of my life. So, you know, the baby becomes the baby that she always wanted. So I do not, maybe they came to a point where
she still tolerated him.
Yeah, there's a middle end of the road that still loved him.
If she completely cut him off, he wouldn't have been living there, or vice versa. He would have probably been the one that had to have left.
You end the scene before, you know, that flash forward to that epilogue almost, kind of, where he's standing going, this is my house, this is my yard, these are the things that I paid for. Declaratively demands everyone to understand and recognize that, and then in the next scene, you see that it's now Rose's house. It's Rose's home. So it's kind of like that chapter afterwards. So you do see, no, I do not think there was there was a tolerance, but there was, you know, things were completely different after that.
Yeah, I agree. I think if it was real life, there's a likelihood that there'd be a reconciliation, but I think, like, as far as this plot goes, I can't foresee it happening.
If it was real life, there would have been a divorce, I think. There would be some kind of, maybe not during this time, but if this was 50 years later, then
Yeah.
But I think as far as it goes, I can't foresee that.
Yeah, no, this is something I was curious to hear.
That's a good question. That's a very good question. But my take on that is, you know, maybe they stuck around in the same house. I've heard plenty of people where, you know, something like that happens, there's a fallout, and it's just easier to stay where you are because, you know, old ways and old habits and stuff like that. But they're two separate entities. You know, it was the two of them up until a point, and then he became so self-absorbed, he kind of almost became like a black hole. And, you know. reaped what the consequences of his actions.
Yep. Already, if you're interested in checking out the play, here is a copy that I acquired of Fences. This includes the script in addition to the different adaptations in the play format. And Tori has one that not only it also includes a foreword.
Yeah, it's a foreword written by Samuel G. Friedman, which is very interesting and gives a little bit more background on not only August Wilson, but on the play itself, and gives you a little bit more food for thought, so it's very good.
Ready then. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Gladiators. For now, keep reading.